let's look at them and explore them for just a moment. They have great names. I don't know who named these things, but they have great names. The pistol grip, slipper shell, monkey face, elephant ear, heel splitter. They have great names. I don't know who named these things, but they did a great job naming these things. I've seen a lot of these in the wild, and they're really fascinating animals to behold. And to hold one in your hand is a really amazing thing. We did some study recently. My coworker did actually for her master's degree, studied the elephant ear muscle, this one here. And we studied it in Blue River. And she collected about 30 individuals out of Blue River. And the quest that she had was to determine, is it still reproducing? We couldn't find any young. All we were finding were old individuals. And this is common for mussels. Where you see them in a lot of our rivers, you see adults, but you don't see youngsters. And for any population, that's trouble, right? And for us, if it was all of us as adults, but there were no kids, we would be concerned. So she took these to find out if they would actually reproduce, put them in a lab, and studied them. Over the course of her studies, a couple of them died. I think 3 of them passed away. She had somebody in Mississippi who was willing to age them. You can age these like trees. They produce a ring each year on their shell. They lay down a new ring of calcium from the calcium they get from the water. Lay down a new ring. You can slice them and age them. The youngest elephant ear we found out of the 3 was 47 years old. 47 years. The oldest one was over 60 years old. That population probably hasn't reproduced in 40 years in the Blue River. Over 40 years has not reproduced successfully. They are the living dead. That population is the living dead. We don't know what is the solution to this. We have an idea, and I'm going to show you what we're thinking about. Why mussels are so endangered is because of this fellow. Okay? Not just him, but many like him. There was a great industry built around taking mussels out of rivers. And it started actually by people looking for freshwater pearls. In the late 1800s, Civil War era, people collected mussels literally by the millions. That's not an exaggeration. They collected them by the millions. And all they did was tear them open to see if they had a pearl in them, and then threw them away. They killed the animal by doing that. Finding a pearl was extremely rare, but it was worthwhile because the pearl was worth so much. And so they took out mussels by the millions. In the late 1800s, German button makers came to the United States and set up an industry to create buttons from mother of pearl out of the freshwater mussels. So men like him would go up and down the river with this apparatus, which they would drag on the bottom. And it was known as a braille, or I forget what else it was called. The next slide will show it. But they actually feeling for the mussels. The mussel would be open, and its tender parts would be open. Let me get to it here. As the hook came across the open part of the mussel would clamp on it, right? And it would pull it up out of the river bottom, and then, after he collected so many, he would then pull them up. And he would have them all hanging from this. So a person could collect them pretty readily. This was not difficult to do at the time when mussels were abundant. This was quite easy to do. That is a pile of mussel shells those people are standing on. There were, I think, 63 known button factories along the Mississippi and Ohio drainages. All of them collecting mussels at this scale. They were collecting animals literally by the millions. Just pulling them out by the tons, and then opening them up, getting the animal out of them, and then using the shell for a button. So it ends up looking like this. I've got a couple back here in my case. If you'd like to look at those are about 100 years old. They would take the shell, clean it, had a machine that would punch a hole, a blank for a button, punch it out, and then they would flatten them by grinding them, And then they would drill holes through them for buttons. And it was said at that time that everyone had these on them from the cradle to the grave. This was what buttons were made from. Everybody had mother of pearl buttons. They were everywhere. They were ubiquitous. If you look at this curve here, I'll explain what this is. Down here at the bottom, this is the year. This year over here is 1894. Okay, 1894 over at your far left. Over at the right, 1991. So there's a span of about 100 years here. This gray shows the number of tons harvested. Black showing the price of the mother of pearl. Okay, you see this inverse relationship between the two. Okay, in 1896 it looks like, or 7, something like that, it goes off the chart. He actually has the number written up here, which is hard to make out here, but that is 8,600 tons of mussels that year. 8,600 tons. So let's multiply that out. That is essentially 16 million, thereabout, pounds of mussel. A mussel is lucky if it weighs a pound. Okay? So in that year alone, they estimate that approximately 16 million mussels were pulled out of the rivers of the Mississippi and the Ohio in one single year. And they did it the next year. And they kept doing this until eventually it was like the bison. They disappeared. There was nothing left. There were just stragglers here and there in the river, and it wasn't worthwhile anymore for them to go searching for them. Price was low anyway. Why spend all your effort out there looking for a few that were left? What happened to the mussel is the same thing that happened to the American bison. It is the same story. And they disappeared. The problem with the mussel is it reproduces very slowly. Bison can reach maturity pretty quick and reproduce. Mussels don't. They're long-lived, as I already showed you. They live a long time. And they reproduce slowly. There's a trick to their reproduction. And it's a funny little trick, which I will show you. But I think you'll like this. But before I go on, I just want to point out that the reason the price went up on this toward the 1990s is that in the 1950s, a Japanese man who cultured pearls figured out that the most economical way to culture a pearl was to get mother of pearl from American mussels, grind them into beads, and then drop them into an oyster. You then let the oyster live in the sea. It will lay down mother of pearl on the American mussel seed, and you can pop out a cultured pearl. Every cultured pearl that you've ever seen comes from this. Okay? They were started from an American mussel that was cut into a tiny bead and then dropped into an oyster. The price of them skyrocketed because of that. So much so that it was a new wave of exploitation going on. And in most cases, most states made it illegal to collect mussels. It is illegal in Indiana to collect mussels. You cannot have them in your possession, a live mussel. And has been for probably 15 years. It's been quite a while now. All right, here's the trick. Mussels cannot reproduce without fish. This is strange. They cannot reproduce without fish. And so there are two methods to this. You have a male and a female mussel. Okay? How they know each other is nearby, I haven't a clue. But somehow they figure out that one another are nearby. And so the female, she becomes receptive to the male. He releases sperm into the water. She siphons it into herself, fertilizes her eggs. She then incubates her eggs inside of her until a fish comes by. The fish comes by and comes up to her. She then releases her, what are called glaucidia, these are the babies, into the fish. She will often surprise the fish. The fish will inhale, suck in the water as it's surprised by her. And these little tiny ones, when they go through the gills, they will clamp onto those gills. They will clamp right down on the gill. And they will stay there for a period of weeks where they're parasites. They suck blood from the fish. This is how mussels get from place to place. They don't walk. Okay? They don't walk. They go on a fish. They hitchhike as babies on fish. After several weeks, the fish, they'll just drop off of the fish slowly. They'll drop off as basically little tiny sand grains size into the sand and the gravel. And that's where they'll start growing. So they'll either attach to the gill, or there's a group of them also that have hooks on them which will attach to fin. But it's the same mechanism. They will clamp on and then draw blood off of them. All right, they have some great ways of doing this. Okay? In fact, they have amazing ways. If you're a mussel, you're pretty nondescript, right? You're not very attractive to a fish, so you got to draw a fish in. You got to get that fish to come into you. So they've come up with all kinds of clever ways to do this. They are amazingly adapted to doing this. So they look like other things that will attract fish. Okay, so you see here the fish. All right, so you got fish here, mussel right here, right? See that one? That's not a fish.
Really?
That is a lure. That is not a fish. That female stuck that out.
Wow.
She stuck that out to draw another fish to come into her. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Check out that shape, eye, fins, dorsal fins. She's got it all. Okay? That is not a fish.
Wow.
And they have different lures. Not every one looks the same. They can be remarkably different from one another. Look at this one here. Imagine this, right here. Crayfish. See the eye spot, legs, and the tail fin. This mussel here, she will wiggle those to look like a crayfish, and she will even take this tail fin and she'll bend it under like this, just like a crayfish would do when it moves to propel itself. She will make a fish think that she's a crayfish to get a fish to come in. These are remarkable, remarkable adaptations to their environment. Really amazing. All right. Now, this is another one, but I've got to show you this. It's not enough just to see these. You've got to see them in motion. Look at that, in motion. Those are not teeth. Those are her egg sacs inside. She's attracting the fish to come to that thinking it's food, and then she will release her glacidia, her young, into that fish. Isn't that remarkable?
How big is that?
It's fist size. Yeah.
Oh, look at those.
There they are. Okay? Each one of those sacs contains hundreds, if not thousands of eggs in each one of those sacs. Okay? It's a risky business out there, so she has to produce many young.